oral statement is included in the record, and we'll begin questioning. Appreciate being joined by Senator Lee and by Congressman Burgess, as well as Senator Klobuchar. Thank you. The size of a country's debt relative to its economy is a major indicator of its financial health. The amount of deficit related to its economy, the same. The size of government related to its economy and to its revenues are critical. Republican or Democrat, everyone agrees that a government that's nearly 25% the size of the economy is unsustainable. So how we shrink the size of this government over time is critical, and those spending caps matter. In the MAP Act, and both Dr. Miller and Dr. Mitchell reference this, we use different metrics. Rather than total spending that includes interest, which isn't controllable. It's like a credit card. You can't control necessarily the interest rate on your card, but you can control is the monthly principal and continuing to focus to shrink that over time. Same with GDP. Not only are there wide bands, it is revised several times over the years. You're always looking back at it, and it can be gamed. People try to get around it by making continual rollover estimations or estimates of it. Potential GDP tracks actual GDP, but a much tighter band. So in the future, you constrain spending during good economic times, and the cuts aren't quite so steep during the tough times. My question is, for lawmakers who are so accustomed to measuring all spending rather than controllable spending and actual GDP versus the more stable potential GDP, as economists, how do you translate this into a real-world example that lawmakers can better understand? Because it is a shift from the way we've thought about spending caps in the past. Dr. Miller, Dr. Mitchell.
Well, nothing comes to my mind as an easy and easily grasped analogy or metaphor on this. I think I have no criticism of your choice of potential GDP. In fact, I think potential GDP, as Dr. Mitchell was mentioning, may have a stabilizing effect along the same lines that Dr. Reischauer was suggesting, that the federal spending does play with our national economy. If I might, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'd like to mention, I'm not sure that maybe it's a clarification of what Bob was saying. I think that these kinds of institutional restraints do work. They absolutely do work. If you look at the Graham-Rudman-Hollings, it really worked. It brought the deficit way down, and it would have brought it all the way down to zero had Congress not panicked and changed the rules or changed the targets when they did. Secondly, I did some work with one of my colleagues, Mark Crane, who, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Casey, is the William Simon Professor of Economics at Lafayette College. And we looked at state restraints, and may have been material that you covered in that report you were talking about, but states that had balanced budget requirements tended to control spending better. States that had a line item veto for the governor tended to control things better. And all those institutional arrangements, they do work. But I think Bob's point is correct, and to the extent that he's saying that they may not work, they wouldn't work if Congress undermines them. So you're making a big statement if you pass this kind of legislation, because you're basically you need to commit that you're going to live under those constraints in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Mitchell?
Your question is a challenge, because I suspect that the average person, or for that matter, the average lawmaker, when told that we're going to have some budget rule focused on potential GDP, they're going to say, wait, that sounds fishy. They're going to be suspicious. And for that matter, primary spending, wait, what's that? So there really is an educational mission here. This hearing obviously is part of it, but I would think if some sort of spending cap legislation does move forward, and as I'm sure you know, Senator Corker has some legislation in the Senate, and so there is a lot of discussion about this, and everyone seems to be talking about discretionary caps. I just think it's a question of almost member-to-member education, staff-to-staff education, so they understand that this isn't just some strange idea pulled out of nowhere that allows for some slipperiness. It's something that actually makes the legislation much more durable over time. And I gave my little example about putting locks on your doors doesn't mean you'll never get victimized by crime. Maybe another way of thinking about it when trying to put together budget process reform is, if I go on a diet and I want to lose 20 pounds and I only lose 10 pounds, it's still good that I went on a diet even if I didn't achieve what I wanted, because it's better not to have those extra 10 pounds. And so, yes, I fully expect that any budget process reform, no matter how well designed, there are going to be challenges in enforcing and implementing it in the future, just because it's just the nature of the political system where people try to get around it. But by all means, it's better than not doing something.
It is the biggest challenge when we set these guardrails, is put them in place in a way where when things get a little tough, as Dr. Miller pointed out, both parties don't hold hands and jump the guardrails. That's been the challenge in the past. Appreciate the commitment. Senator Casey.
Thanks very much, Mr. Vice Chairman. Dr. Reischauer, I wanted to ask you